FORA.tv. The world is thinking.
What about the postulate that there are limits? We may debate over just what they are, but there are limits to the degree that government may dictate how we use our bodies, how we raise our children, how we define our families, how we enter and exit this earthly life. Isn't that a postulate that is absolutely central to a non-totalitarian form of government that our Constitution surely presupposes? But it's not anywhere in the Constitution's written text. It's etched in the very marrow of its skeletal structure. Of course, there can be controversies over whether the court got it right or not in a decision like Roe v. Wade, or even if we didn't have any court, whether state lawmakers who take an oath to uphold the Constitution would violate it or not if they imposed one or another restriction on abortion. What makes that hard is that the status of the fetus is very much contested. But the proposition that a woman has some ultimate and important right to control her physical destiny, that what you do in the privacy of your home that doesn't cause violence to anyone, is at least presumptively protected. We can argue about what the limits of the presumption are, but those propositions, that you are the owner of your own body, that there's something about the intimate structure of your life that is beyond the reach of the arm of the state, I submit is an absolute axiom of our constitutional order, though it's nowhere written down. So that when people say, for example, people like Justice Scalia or Justice Thomas or Justice Alito or Justice Roberts, sometimes Justice Kennedy, but not very often, when they say to those who would protect fundamental rights of personal privacy that the Constitution in its writing nowhere protects the right of privacy, they're making a statement that is true but trivial and certainly doesn't prove very much. But this is an equal opportunity form of error, because when people on the right wing of the court say that even if Congress acts within the literal ambit of its power, it cannot reduce the states to mere departments of the national government, leading them around like puppets and commandeering what they do, that it can't do that, can't make states do the bidding of the national government. The more liberal members of the court get up on their high horse and they say, where'd you find that in the text of the Constitution? It's like two ships passing in the night. Neither side tends to remind the other that when it favors the values they think are central to the Constitution, they are willing to derive meaning from the tacit postulates of the Constitution, its architecture, its structure, its spirit, its history. We ought to get over it. We ought to recognize on both sides of that divide that much of what is fundamental in the Constitution is simply not written down. It's invisible. It's not part of the text. And we should be conducting a more meaningful dialogue, not a gotcha dialogue. Oh, you have a right there that I dare you to find in the text. And how about you when you say states' rights? Where do you find that in the text? We ought instead to have a dialogue about what, whether it's in the text or not, is fundamental to the body of law that identifies our evolving character as a nation. In fact, the proposition that not all of the Constitution's core postulates can be found in its visible text is a message that we can get from the text itself. The Constitution cries out, my text is not all there is. After all, the Ninth Amendment says that the failure of the Constitution to enumerate certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage the existence of those rights that are not enumerated. One can have debates over the meaning of that amendment. The very nature of a finite text is that it will not answer all questions about its own meaning, because the question of how you interpret what I've just said about the language of the Ninth Amendment is a question that the Constitution's text can't answer. And if it purported to answer it with a few rules, the meaning of those rules would be contestable. It's the problem of infinite regress.